This is BizPulse on Africa News Network, First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. Good to have you and good evening to you. The South African Airways money woes continue as its losses are set to widen to 4 billion rand in the 2017-18 financial year, up from a previous estimate of 2.8 billion rand. This is according to the airline's chief financial officer. The new SAA board was briefing Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance about its quarterly report. The CFO, Phumeza Nhatsi, told MPs that the higher projected losses for 2017-18 were related to the retirement of 5 leased narrow-body aircrafts. And the airline admits that even with a government injection of 10 billion rand, SAA will remain undercapitalized with a negative equity position of over 9 billion rand. The new CEO, Vuyani Jarane, says that the airline has an outstanding debt of 13.8 billion rand as of this month. The airline will also need to find money to pay back domestic lenders and the U.S. bank Citi 4 billion rand by March 2018.
On the issue of which the chair has addressed of transformation, cadet pilots and staff engagement, in the same way that feedback has been received by the members of the committee in traveling with an SAA, 2 months before, since I signed in September, the people of SAA were talking to me, whether it's cabin crew, ground staff, giving me these insights. So what we have already done is to engage deeply with every staff member. We've briefed the unions. We're going to have a labor caucus that ensures that we onboard everybody else in the strategy as we chart the path forward. What's been encouraging in the few days that have been engaging is the commitment of the people of SAA to, they want a change, they want a new SAA, they want an SAA that's sustainable.
And let's take a look at the current status of the South African Airways debt. SAA is reliant on government debt guarantees of almost 20 billion rand. As of July 2017, Treasury gave SAA a 2.3 billion rand bailout to settle its debt with Standard Chartered. And 9 lenders agreed to roll over debt beyond the September the 30th deadline. Citibank only agrees to roll over a portion of their debt. And in September 2017, SAA receives another 3 billion rand to repay Citibank's debt and as a working capital. Treasury plans another 10 billion rand capital injection in the midterm budget policy statement. And we're joined in studio by Tsepo Khadima, political analyst, Adil Nchabeleng, Transform RSA President, Zamo Madlala, Radical Economic Transformation on Coalition spokesperson. Thanks indeed for your time, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us. The woes at SAA, it's going to be quite a while before those are resolved. With the current model of being dependent on government for cash injections, is this sustainable?
No, it is not sustainable. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw into SAA with its current capital structure. And by that I mean in terms of how it is owned and what portion of its capital structure is equity and what portion is debt. It is just not possible to save South African Airways. So, but it's interesting that maybe I think viewers at home need to bear this in mind. It means from each rising of the sun to the setting of the same, South African Airways loses 10,958,000 rand thereabout. Almost 11 million rand that South African Airways loses each and every single day. Now you tell me about any business that would be generating income, but at the same time having 10,958,000 rand more out of that business as a loss. Whether that business can be salvaged, no. But SAA has got very good load factors. This very day, I flew in on one of South African Airways aircrafts. In fact, the aircrafts that were acquired during Coleman Andrews' era when he made that fatal decision to actually sell and lease back most of the aircraft that SAA is using today. So SAA is using first generation Boeing's narrow body 737-800 aircraft. That is a fuel guzzler. It is not fuel efficient at all. It is not an aircraft that really is to be used by a modern carrier such as South African Airways. But that is what they have on their fleet, and a majority of those. So we should not be surprised that their losses are mounting each day. But more importantly, as I say, that it is astonishing that even the new CEO and the new board that have come in have not, from day one, the moment they walked into that office, one thing that they needed to have tackled was the fact that it is not sustainable to lease almost all of the very basic equipment that an airline needs to be able to exist and call itself an airline, that is aircraft. They are leasing 51 aircraft on conditions that are exceedingly onerous. Why they have not sought to go and rather lease newer generation aircraft at a lower cost than what they are currently paying, it is beyond me, because it's certainly not a shortage of aircraft on the market. There's a lot of aircraft. But what is fundamental to run an airline is to be able to have routes, because the aviation industry is highly regulated. There has been no deregulation in the aviation industry. So the most important asset of South African Airways, which is the routes that it has, those routes are not being utilized optimally. But even in those instances where they are using those routes, the load factors are very good, but their cost structures are exceedingly bad. For example, even today in the Standing Committee on Finance, why the issue of what was exposed by ANN7, I would have thought that at least today they would have looked into or get a report back on the reports that ANN7 ran an expose on what were the chief causes of the very perilous financial state that SAA is perpetually in, and none of that was addressed. If anything, it would appear that even the MPs are accepting that it is normal and acceptable that SAA can lose 4 billion rand, and now maybe let's find, because the one that we hated the most is no longer on the board, therefore now we can give these other ones it's unacceptable. Yeah, but the office in the US, for example, whereby there is nobody employed there, but they're paying millions of dollars, that was never even addressed, it was just overlooked, and now it is business as usual. So SAA, in fact, unfortunately, is going to sink, because Treasury, I can assure you, Treasury does not have the means of any more income to be able to put into SAA. Whatever that they sell, that they are trying to sell, the whole is that much bigger. Treasury now has got a headache worth 240 billion rand. So therefore, they do not have the means of being able to save SAA, even if they wanted to save SAA. There's only one thing to do, that is to radically alter the capital structure of SAA and forgo these leases that they have, because those are the chief source of its, and of course then become lean and efficient on operations.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems like almost a subculture, as you were saying. There have been many investigations done and very little came out of it. And the management being oblivious, either not having an idea as to what to do. We've heard of a proposed strategic partner. We've heard of various means of maybe recapitalization. The minister himself saying that it still remains undercapitalized, in the sense that since 1994 the airline hadn't been overhauled or transformed. It's been business as usual. In your view, is this now a good time perhaps to shut it down or to privatize completely?
Thank you, Cindy. I think what we're facing today is what we've been reporting all these months, and I'm glad that the entire picture has come on full scope. We've been saying that SAA is losing money. We didn't say it is not profitable. Currently, SAA is losing money, yet generating revenue. Where are the crises? It has been sitting on the issues relating to the way the airline has been structured and geared in terms of its full capacity to become a profitable organization rather than a loss-making organization while generating money. Remember that the current losses in SAA were engineered losses. These were not losses because the airline industry is suffering. No, it was losses on the basis that, one, they removed the asset structure of SAA, which is its carrier airlines, and then they gave out a lease option. Then you came to the second option, whereby after having removed the basis of having an asset, then you started going into a similar asset of taking the same asset and leasing it on an exorbitant amount of money. And not only that, there were issues of efficiencies as well as management. One, the cash flow was not properly managed. You have huge amount of losses generated out of expenses that do not make sense, wasteful expenditure and fruitless expenditure. The other aspect of it is there has been a lot of contracts. I mean, you are running evergreen contracts and agreements that have been going over 40 years in a main, whereby people are receiving benefits upon benefits upon benefits for delivering very little value to the airline. So there is a fundamental flaw and problem, and I'm happy that the CEO that has come in has actually picked up the problem. You know, Jahana has now seen it that, look, we're faced with a situation, but this should not be a situation whereby now people start the debate to say, since the airline is in a struggling position, they must then privatize it. That is the wrong option. You know what the problem is, correct the problems, and then put it onto a trajectory whereby the airline becomes profitable and South African jobs are saved, and we bring back the airline to its level of profitability and efficiency. And on top of it, we have an asset that we can now own proudly as South Africa today.
How do you reverse those evergreen contracts, considering they've entrenched themselves comfortably so historically?
They will be reversed. I think there is a bigger mischief that perhaps maybe we just haven't come to terms with yet. And the bigger mischief is that of ensuring that SAA is privatized, because SAA is an exceedingly valuable asset on the reasons I have adduced, and one of them being that because of the aviation industry being highly regulated, it is not just a simple mechanism to say, I've got the cash, I've got aircraft, let me get into aviation. You're going to need licensing, and that is it's a big barrier to entry for anyone who wants to get into the aviation space. So that is the one thing. However, what we are seeing here, and what has been suggested, I'm still shocked that Treasury and even the new board, they somehow believe that they are going to get an equity investor. And I've made this point many times before, that if it is not privatization, it is still privatization through the back door, because whoever is the equity investor, meaning one entity that will own 20%, even 25%, one of the key demands that that entity is going to have is going to control the operations and the cash flows of South African Airways. The turnover of South African Airways is well over 100 million rand a day. That is at the end of the day when you take into account what this... So you hear of an organization that has got exceedingly good cash flows, but those cash flows are not well managed. And I'm saying it would appear that they are not well managed through design. The system is choreographed to fail so that there can be somebody who picks up a bargain or picks up SAA at a bargain basement price. But the equity investor who comes in will demand to control the cash flows, and that equity investor, I can assure you, will immediately move and seek cancellation or termination of these onerous lease agreements that are drowning SAA, and ensure that they have got equipment, which is aircraft, that is cost efficient, that does not use as much fuel. In fact, if SAA had a 4% saving on its fuel bill, it would be profitable. That's the difference between profit and bankruptcy. Just a 4% saving on its fuel bill. And I can assure you, whoever comes in will demand that. So the so-called strategic equity investor, what they will do, they will privatize the positive cash flows and the profits, and they will nationalize the losses and the economic pain to the people of South Africa. And I am asking, if a strategic equity investor, so-called, can do that and achieve that, what is constraining this group of people, this board, from being able to do exactly the same thing that they are expecting somebody else? And it is often said, leaders who refuse to lead are destined to be led by those who are worse than themselves. So for as long as we have a leadership and management at South African Airways that is timid, that is refusing to lead and take the right decisions, they are destined to be, at the end of the day, managed and run by people who are much more worse, who are greedy privateers.
And Zamo Madlala, thank you so much for your patience and for holding, in the sense that these executives, we've heard of the systemic corruption within SAA and deliberate lack of capacity, so that in the chaos there are those who are benefiting. It's going to take the board also political will in turning around the SAA. Your view?
Good evening, Cindy, and to the viewers at home. Well, our view is pretty much the following basic. Right now, we had SAA, the board, and the chief executive officer come in to project what's going to happen up until the 2018 financial year end. Currently, as I stand and sit right now, the 2017 financial statements have not been released because the Auditor General hasn't been able to audit them and release them publicly. So how can we sit and gauge how much we need to put into SAA and what's going to turn SAA around We've been sitting with a long-term turnaround strategy since 2013 that has done nothing except to accumulate the losses going forward, because on the basis of the 2016 financial statements, SAA is not a going concern, and the only reason it remains a going concern is that government keeps on giving it the guarantees that it needs to go and borrow money. But on its own, it is not a going concern. So we need to stop, see the wood for the trees at the end of the day, and take the decisions we need to take. We can't keep on hopping from the one and then thinking we're going to budget going forward without looking at what our core problems are. Core problem is the capital structure. It's undercapitalized horribly. It was wrong to pull the business out of Transnet and not take it to transport where it could have been funded. It doesn't make sense for the business to sit in Treasury right now because Treasury doesn't even have the money to capitalize it. The other day we had our plane grounded in Zimbabwe because AXA sits under transport, but SAA sits under another department, so we are not taking advantage of our own value chain even within South Africa. So in terms of everything, and I'm talking from the shareholder down to the board, down to management, the left hand is not speaking to the right hand, not speaking to the feet. So the business is continually going to be suffering. And those who are benefiting out of procurement, they don't mind. They continue sending their invoices and their invoices get paid.
But under the new leadership, is there a semblance of hope that indeed there's a strategy that is workable, measurable, that can be implemented to see the financial woes of SAA turn around?
Clearly, the new leadership is struggling, because why do you start off by actually announcing a losses which you're supposed to actually be giving a solution to what is currently being hemorrhaging? If you're saying there's a hemorrhaging, a patient is losing, one vein is open, and if this patient is not assisted immediately and instantly, this is what will happen. And all you just focus on, he says, there is a loss. Yes, we know there is a loss within SAA. We've already reported about those issues. But what we're saying is, what is the strategy to actually turn around SAA and make it fully profitable? The company is making money. And now you're talking about the fact that you want to, because there's a loss, you want to introduce a capital investor in making sure that he can actually come in and share the profits with you with very minimal in terms of investment into the organization, the company. So this is not a real solution. The current leadership needs to understand that now they are actually in a position whereby they cannot keep on hiding behind the flag of continuously telling us things that we know. Those are fairy tale stories. We already know SAA is making a loss. What we said is, what are the plans to make the organization be turned around and be retained back into profitability? What are the solutions? Why is the CEO not talking about the evergreen agreements and contracts? Why is he not talking about the losses in terms of flying aircrafts on a twin engine where you need a single, you need an engine which is not a twin engine to fly to a destination? Why are they not talking about the current arrangement they have with the fuel suppliers and everybody? Why are they not introducing discount models and everything? So the issues are very simple. In the airline industry, there are basics that needs to be followed in order to become profitable. And in this case, SAA is no exception. But the leadership is a bigger problem right now, including the board, which we already warned the minister that do not appoint certain individuals on that board because their only intention and agenda is to drive SAA to be privatized.
Yeah, should they also recover the money from former CEO Coleman Andrews, including the fact that the inventory that was sold off is now essentially being leased back and forth in US rand currency?
I mean, any attempt to recover the loot that was handed down to or handed over to Coleman Andrews is going to be exceedingly difficult legally. And it will be a diversion, I think, from the key thing that they need to do. What they need to do is to actually undo all the legacy agreements and contracts that Coleman Andrews entered into, because he did so. In fact, his decisions condemned SAA to be in this perpetual state of being terminally ill, and I can't see how it will be able to recover. As you say, not just the aircraft. You know, it's astonishing for me. Ethiopian Airlines is not having the problems that South African Airways is having. Southwest Airlines is the only airline in history from 1973 to date, has never in 1 year lost any money, and is flying, by the way, 737-800 aircraft from Boeing, and is not losing any money. How can we therefore have South African Airways losing money and hand over fist? Emirates Airline, for example. It doesn't matter what they tell you. What constrains SAA from purchasing its own fuel instead of currently dealing through middlemen at the current... there are a lot of interventions that can be done, but they will only be done once they privatize it, I can assure you. Right now, it is actually incompetence by design.
Sure. It's one, I think, that will sit with us for a long time. And again, you know, hopefully we won't be having this conversation after the board has been active for over 100 days. But your very brief comments in where it stands at the moment, is there a inclination that things are likely to change?
Immediately, the contracts must be renegotiated. Secondly, you cannot be paying 3 months of a lease for not using aircrafts which are currently sitting down on a runway. So the certain things must be changed quickly to bring back the airline to profitability. Transform RSA says change what has been agreed upon in the past and make new contracts and start a new slate.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, gentlemen, as always. Tefo Hadima, political analyst, and Adilin Chabeleng, Transform RSA president. Samo Madala, Radical Economic Transformation and Coalition spokesperson, on the line with us, reflecting on SAA, its financial woes, and what the future holds for the airline. And now on to other news stories. There will be accountability, and this is the commitment made by the newly appointed Police Commissioner, General Kehla Sithole, as he addressed the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in Parliament. The management of the South African Police Service, the State Information and Technology Agency, and the Independent Police Investigative Unit reported to Parliament regarding an irregular expenditure of 6.1 billion rand in irregular expenditure. And parliamentarians grilled the newly appointed National Police Commissioner, General Sithole, on the procurement of forensic goods by the FD Trading and a company owned by businessman Keith Keating. An investigation conducted by IPID alleges that Keating had a corrupt relationship with the former acting police commissioner Khomotso Phahlane. And IPID also alleges the duo could have been involved in money laundering and kickback payments. The new commissioner says that the committee that he would ensure, or rather he set up a committee that all suppliers to SAPS must go through a vigorous vetting process.
I would like to speak in the capacity of National Commissioner because crime intelligence is also accountable to me. Supply chain, the instruction is they are running on a dedicated vetting project, and then that is work in progress. And by the time we come back to this committee, all supply chain practitioners will be vetted, and I'm going to also give that direction to crime intelligence.
And the head of the State Intelligence or IT, the SETA, conceded that the procurement guidelines in this matter were indeed not followed. SETA says it will use a recent Constitutional Court judgment that provides the ability to investigate irregular procurement more effectively.
First of all, I would like to apologize if I suggested to my body language that there's nothing wrong. There's everything wrong with not running procurement process in particular in a clean way. And we are doing quite a lot to do with that. We just had a Constitutional Court judgment that allows us now to challenge all decisions that are made by SETA, not on the basis of PAJA, but on the basis of legality, irrespective of when those decisions were made. Our intention is to use that new tool that we just got in the Constitutional Court about 2 weeks ago to then fix whatever things went wrong, even if they went wrong 180 days prior.
Ahead of IPID, Robert McBride confirmed that the probe against the former acting police commissioner Khomotso Phahlane has widened despite intimidation from various groups involved in the case.
We've been harassed, intimidated, distracted, attacked on every turn by members of SAPS, in particular General Phahlane, some members of crime intelligence, and a unit from the Northwest who we investigating for a number of other offenses, including murder and torture. Investigation started with investigations by IPID into a house and vehicles by former acting National Commissioner Phahlane, for which he did not pay for. And the investigation is broadened out and it's gone regional and possibly international, and with bank transfers being tracked, including by FIC. So we believe that with the appointment of General Sithole, this investigation will be expedited and be brought to conclusion quite quickly. But we have to alert that it's getting broader and more complex.
887 Prime takes a quick break. Do stay with us for the latest news and sport update just after this.